Have you ever been friends with a person who, out of the blue, was convicted of a crime? The chef's secret. When I got my first job at 16 as a dishwasher, there was a 50-something chef there too. He had a strong Cockney accent, and he was nice, hilarious, and always helped me when I had too many dishes and couldn't manage on my own. He also taught me how to make simple dishes so I could help him out too sometimes if he was too busy, like desserts, salads, etc. After a couple years, he fully trained me to be a chef and to be able to run the restaurant on my own. He was always nice, caring, patient, and understanding that I was just a stupid kid and messed up sometimes. I reckon me and him had a great kind of friendship. We always joked around and had a laugh and had a good time, and we felt kind of like family, especially after working 10+ hours a day together for many years. One day, he tells me that he spent over 25 years in prison for 3 murders. I thought it was a joke at first, but it was actually real. I didn't really care, but that was so crazy and shocking. The family I trusted. More than 10 years ago, I used to give private music lessons to kids and adults, anyone 12 and up. One of the kids was staying with a friend whose parents asked if I'd be interested in taking their child on for lessons. I said sure. Over the next couple of years, I got pretty close to this family. The child was a surprise baby for a really sweet woman who was on her second marriage. She hoped this marriage would be better than her last one. She called her ex a cheating liar, not my words. One day, the dad came to the lesson with the kid, and we started talking about music. He was really into it and wanted to take lessons himself. Why not, right? The more the merrier. For the next 3 or 4 years, I became close with him. The dad invited me to join a music trivia team. I know a lot about music, history, and trivia. I even teach it sometimes, so I was happy to join. Our team was amazing. Everyone had their specialty. Decades, subjects, experience. We won most of the time and were undefeated for a while. A year later, after I had moved, the kid lost interest in lessons, and the dad changed jobs. He asked if I wanted to come back to the trivia team. I said I was busy but might be able to make it if needed. Then one day, I got a call from the wife. I thought maybe it was about the quiz final. Instead, she told me the dad had been arrested for possessing child pornography. The police came early one morning, seized all their electronics, right when the kid was taking important exams, and he was taken away. He went to prison. I stayed close with the wife and kid. They had nowhere to go, so I let them stay in my small apartment. I even helped them rent a van, pack up, and move far away. Now he's out of prison and has bought a house up north. The wife is working hard to rebuild her life after losing everything because of what happened. I feel for her and the kid, they were the real victims. But honestly, the whole time I knew him, I never would have guessed he was a predator. It still makes me sick to think about all those hours I spent alone with him, teaching or driving to quizzes. Drunk decisions and harsh consequences. One of my close friends once made a mistake so bad it completely wrecked his life. He ended up with 12 years in prison for armed robbery, and then got deported. Started on a night out. He got unbelievably drunk, the kind of drunk where you can barely stand, and was ready to head home. But his buddy had this brilliant idea that they should make someone take money out of their bank account. So his buddy grabbed a knife, they found some random guy, forced him to take out a few hundred from an ATM, and then walked off like nothing happened. My friend was so out of it that the next day he could not even remember what had happened. He never touched the knife, but when it all came out in court, his so-called friend testified that he did. That lie earned him 12 years behind bars. 2 years into his sentence, the authorities discovered something that even he did not know. He was not actually a British citizen. His mother had always told him he was born in the United Kingdom. But the truth was, she had brought him there when he was 4 months old and never told anyone. Turned out, he was legally German, even though he had never set foot in Germany and did not speak a word of the language. They deported him there, and now he is banned from returning to the United Kingdom. The lesson here? Do not get blackout drunk and go along with stupid ideas that seem harmless in the moment. And, as a side note, not too long ago a guy I went to every single school with got arrested for killing another man in our local park. That one did not surprise me much. Honestly, I was more shocked it took until he was 30 for it to finally happen. The teacher I never really knew. Back when I was in sixth form college, around 17 or 18 years old, I had a teacher who seemed like one of the nicest people you could meet. She was friendly with everyone, always willing to help, and got along well with all the students. At the time, I was struggling badly with depression. She knew I was going through a rough patch, and she would often talk to me after class. We would chat about our dogs and how much comfort they could bring. She invited me more than once to come meet her dog and go for a walk. I actually wanted to, but I was in such a low place that I hardly ever left the house unless my mom made me go to college. If I had been feeling better back then, I probably would have gone. It was not until my early 20s that I found out the truth about her. She had been arrested for grooming and having a sexual relationship with a student. The timing meant it had to be someone in my year. From what I heard, it all started with her inviting them over to meet her dog. That realization hit hard. I could have been her first target if I had accepted those invitations. It was a shock. She had always seemed so kind, even a bit lonely. You never would have guessed what was really going on behind the scenes. The client I never expected. I work as a personal trainer, and a while back I started training this 16-year-old kid. He wanted to bulk up for his job in manual labor and also gain a little confidence. From the start, he reminded me of the quiet type, the kind of person who would not say a word unless spoken to. He kept his head down, was polite, and honestly seemed like a really good kid. He was also the perfect client. Always on time, eager to learn, and willing to put in the work both in the gym and at home. Everything was going great until one day he just did not show up for his session. No call, no message, nothing. I tried reaching out a few times that day, and again the next day, but got no answer. I figured maybe he lost his phone or had something going on at home, so I did not think much of it. A couple of days later, I got a phone call, not from him, but from the anti-terrorism unit. That is when I learned the truth. He had been under investigation for a while for visiting some extremely dangerous websites. When they arrested him, they found a detailed manifesto about how he planned to attack a synagogue and a few other places. They asked me to give a character reference and let them know if he had ever said anything about it during our training sessions. He never had. To me, he had just been that quiet, hardworking kid who wanted to get stronger. The coworker I thought I knew. Yesterday, I was hit with some news that left me completely stunned. I found out that a former coworker of mine, someone I had been pretty close to at work, had just been sentenced to prison a few days ago. He had beaten his disabled wife so badly, and in front of their kids, while high on cocaine. From what I knew of him at work, he was the quiet type, the sort of person who would not say boo to a goose. We would often stand around complaining about work, swap stories about our families, and just chat whenever we happened to run into each other. I could have imagined him being led into smaller trouble, maybe trying drugs or getting caught up in petty crimes, but this, I never would have believed he was capable of something that violent. It really made me wonder if other people have had the same experience. Finding out that someone you thought you knew well was hiding a much darker side. The girl from the shelter. When I was about 18 or 19, I met a woman in her early 20s while I was staying in a homeless shelter. She had just finished serving 9 months in prison and another 9 months on a tag. In places like that, gossip spreads fast. Everyone already knew she had done time, but none of us knew why. She turned out to be really friendly and open. In fact, she told us her story the very first time we met her. It was shocking. One night, she got extremely drunk, and she was 7 months pregnant at the time, and ended up smashing a glass into someone's face outside a pub. The way she described it was so strange compared to the person she seemed to be. She came across as warm and easy to talk to, not violent at all. The last time I saw her, she was trying to leave her abusive boyfriend, the father of her baby. He was also living in the shelter and had swastika tattoos right on his neck. The friend I had to walk away from. Back in sixth form, my closest friend was a guy in the year above me. People called him my gay best friend. A term I never really liked, but we were inseparable. We had sleepovers all the time and were a big part of each other's lives. When he left for university, we started talking less. I figured he was just busy, meeting new people and enjoying his freedom. Then one day, one of our old teachers pulled me aside and told me something I never saw coming. He was going to prison. He was sentenced to 4 years for multiple charges, including making and sharing explicit images of children, and for persuading minors to engage in sexual activity. I remembered a conversation we had back when we were still close. He had been crying and told me that, at 18, he had slept with a 16-year-old boy he met at a nightclub. He said he had no idea the boy was underage, since you had to be 18 to even get into the club, and I had comforted him. I told him it was not his fault if the kid had used a fake ID. But the truth was far darker. He had been pretending to be a girl online to get teenage boys to send indecent photos, and then he would blackmail them. Later, it came out that some of the boys were from our own school year. He is out of prison now and insists he did nothing wrong. I will never be friends with him again, even though a lot of our old mutual friends still are. The workplace I'll never forget. I used to work in a place where, looking back, the staff roster could have been pulled straight out of a crime documentary. One of the people I knew there had been convicted of murder. He served 12 years and was out on license when I worked with him. Then there was another guy who had scammed elderly people through a timeshare scheme. I knew he was in trouble for something, but I had no idea just how big it was until later. He got 6 years for it, if I remember correctly. And then there was the one that still makes me feel sick to think about. I was only on speaking terms with him, not friends. We all knew he had been arrested for something, and the general belief was that it was just for having illegal pictures. The truth turned out to be far worse. He was sentenced to 14 years for horrific crimes against his own 14-year-old daughter. All of these people worked in the same place with me. Honestly, you could ask me anything about that job, and it would still sound unbelievable. Part 9. 3 friends I could never forgive. I used to have 3 friends who are now completely out of my life, all for the same disgusting reason. Every single one of them turned out to be a predator. The first one got caught messaging a young girl from Wales. He even spoke to her parents, pretending to be the father of a friend she had met online, and tried to convince them it was fine for her to come stay with him. What finally stopped it was a teacher overhearing her talking to friends about the trip and raising the alarm. Looking back, he was over 18 and still sneaking into underage clubs. We should have realized something was off, but at the time, most of us were too young to really see it. The second one was caught twice for having an enormous stash of illegal images and videos, first on his computer, then again later on his gaming console. I was never very close to him, and while he seemed all right on the surface, there was always something that felt a little off. The third one hit me the hardest. I saw him like a younger brother and cared for him like family. Then one day I saw his face on the front page of the paper. He had been abusing his young neighbor for years, starting when he was still a teenager himself. It broke me. A couple of years later, he walked into my old workplace, saw me, and immediately turned around and left. The look on his face was pure shame. The second guy also used to show up at my work from time to time, and it took everything in me not to punch that creepy smile off his face. I even told my coworkers that if he so much as looked at a kid in the store, they had better hold me back, because I would not hesitate to go over the counter and beat him senseless. The cousin nobody expected. This one is about my cousin. Growing up, he was your typical lad's lad type, nothing remarkable, just average in every way. In school, he would mess around a bit, but never in a way that got him into real trouble. He never started fights, but his group of friends were mostly stoners, hotheads, and general troublemakers. Still, he was always respectful toward family, sometimes even a little shy. He had never been in trouble with the police and never showed any real aggression, unless we were playing Call of Duty, and then he could get pretty worked up. One day, he went out for a quick run to the shop to grab snacks and energy drinks. An hour passed, then 2. None of us thought much of it at first, until there was a knock at the door. He and my aunt were staying at my mom's house at the time, so she answered. 2 police officers were standing there and asked my aunt to come down to the station. That is when we learned what happened. As my cousin was leaving the shop, a 16-year-old kid started harassing him and shoving him. Witnesses said my cousin tried to walk away and ignore it. But then, all of a sudden, he snapped. Out of nowhere, he pulled out a knife and stabbed the boy twice in the neck. The kid died. None of us had any idea he even carried a knife. Nobody saw it coming. The family I trusted. More than 10 years ago, I used to give private music lessons to kids and adults, anyone 12 and up. One of the kids was staying with a friend whose parents asked if I'd be interested in taking their child on for lessons. I said sure. Over the next couple of years, I got pretty close to this family. The child was a surprise baby for a really sweet woman who was on her second marriage. She hoped this marriage would be better than her last one. She called her ex a cheating liar, not my words. One day, the dad came to the lesson with the kid, and we started talking about music. He was really into it and wanted to take lessons himself. Why not, right? The more the merrier. For the next 3 or 4 years, I became close with him. The dad invited me to join a music trivia team. I know a lot about music, history, and trivia. I even teach it sometimes, so I was happy to join. Our team was amazing. Everyone had their specialty. Decades, subjects, experience. We won most of the time and were undefeated for a while. A year later, after I had moved, the kid lost interest in lessons, and the dad changed jobs. He asked if I wanted to come back to the trivia team. I said I was busy but might be able to make it if needed. Then one day, I got a call from the wife. I thought maybe it was about the quiz final. Instead, she told me the dad had been arrested for possessing child pornography. The police came early one morning, seized all their electronics, right when the kid was taking important exams, and he was taken away. He went to prison. I stayed close with the wife and kid. They had nowhere to go, so I let them stay in my small apartment. I even helped them rent a van, pack up, and move far away. Now he's out of prison and has bought a house up north. The wife is working hard to rebuild her life after losing everything because of what happened. I feel for her and the kid, they were the real victims. But honestly, the whole time I knew him, I never would have guessed he was a predator. It still makes me sick to think about all those hours I spent alone with him, teaching or driving to quizzes. The guy who turned dark. There was this guy we all knew as a fun, easygoing guy. But then he started acting strange, like really goth in a childish way, which was odd because he was older than most of us. He drifted away from our group, but we'd still see him hanging around metal bars and pubs, always by himself, acting kind of weird. Less than a year later, we heard the worst. He had been arrested for rape and attempted murder. The story was horrifying. He followed a young girl home from a bar, broke into her house, raped her while she was in bed, and then tried to kill her by pouring bleach down her throat and trying to strangle her. We knew he'd become a jerk, but no one could wrap their head around something so terrible. One of my friends even went to visit him in prison, hoping to understand what happened, but it made no sense at all. About 10 years later, he made the news again, and then again, and again. I won't get into the details here because some of it might trigger filters, but trust me, it's bad. The friend who changed his story. Man, saying I was mad about this is putting it lightly. This was back in the early 2000s. 3 of my buddies shared a house, and a bunch of us would spend most of our free time there. One night, I showed up and noticed one of them wasn't around. I asked where he was, and they told me he'd been arrested after a police raid at dawn. We all chipped in and bailed him out. A few hours later, he came back and told us his side of the story. He said it was all a big mix-up, a case of mistaken identity. Apparently, a local shop had been robbed at gunpoint. They showed him the security footage, and he claimed the guy looked just like his identical twin. He ended up serving some months, and that was that for me. Fast forward about 15 years. We were hanging out at his place. By now, he had settled down with a family. The topic of his time in prison came up. Someone who didn't know the story asked about it, so he told his version. He and a friend had printed out a fake invoice with the store's letterhead. I think it was Kai's. Put on high-visibility vests, got in a van, and parked behind the shop. They told the staff they were there to pick up returns, loaded up the van, then got pulled over by the cops shortly after. That's when the arrest and prison time happened. I spoke up and said, "Hey, that's not the story you told us when we bailed you out." He insisted it was the same. I looked around, and everyone else agreed that the newer story was the real one. So that leaves a few possibilities. Either he lied to us back then, or he's lying now and everyone just believes him, or maybe he half-truthed it both times and there's some mix of stories. The dark secrets at work. I wasn't really friends with these guys, but I worked with a couple of fellas who had some pretty dark secrets. The first guy always hinted at something bad but never gave any details until the trial. Turns out, He and another guy had basically beaten one of their friends to death over an Xbox. He was pretty open about it after the fact but never admitted full responsibility. Just said he was there and got caught up in it. I left that job before he was sentenced, but a few months later he got sentenced to several years. His mugshot was all over the papers and even made it onto Scottish National News and the BBC. The second guy I worked with just disappeared, taking sick leave for a long time. The management wouldn't talk about it much. It was a small company, so when someone was off sick, you usually knew what was going on. After weeks, they finally said he had left, and that was that, no more discussion. This one never made the news, so I'm not totally sure what happened. But the story was that he did awful things to his young disabled niece. Honestly, I'd rather not know the details. The customer who was stealing from us. We had this customer who spent between £100,000 and £200,000 a year on rare collectibles. He made up about half of our revenue. He never tried to bargain and always paid top dollar. He was the kind of customer every business dreams of. Over 5 years, he spent more than £500,000 with us. Then suddenly, he disappeared without a trace. A couple of years later, I saw him in the newspaper. It turned out he was actually the company accountant for the business he worked for, and he had been using company money to buy collectibles from us and other places for his own personal stash. He got away with it because one of his real suppliers had a name very similar to ours, just one letter different, so he managed to trick us into thinking he was buying for that company. The scam only came to light when his company was bought out. The new owners couldn't figure out how the profits suddenly looked better than before. They dug into the old accounts and caught him. If he had kept tapering off the fraud slowly, he probably would have gotten away with it. He stole over £1 million, but they only recovered about $300,000. Before he was caught, he even sold some of the items back to us for about 30% of what he originally paid. He got 3 years in prison but served only 18 months with good behavior in a minimum security facility.